Our next video on the finding and replacing data function. So you're probably familiar with this function from other Office applications such as Word or Outlook. And you're probably familiar with the shortcut to get to the find and replace function as well, Control plus F, because it's the same as those applications. What you're probably not familiar with is some of the more advanced features in Microsoft Excel, find and replace, that aren't available in those other applications. So we can do some pretty advanced things with this, which I'm going to walk through with you. So aside from the basic replacing text and numbers, which let's quickly go through that now, the most basic use of this feature is to do Control F and find an instance of something. So let's say we want to find an instance of the word adapter. So we can search for that in the find, so by pressing find next or find all. So the difference between the two options is if we press find next, it's just going to jump to the next instance after you've selected a starting cell. Now it's jumping down this way is because you've selected it by rows. If you select it by columns, it's going to search this way first. So let's say we have the word adapter over here, and select over here, and then go by find columns. The one it's going to choose first is this one over here. So if you choose rows, it's going to go that way, and if you choose columns, it's going to go down that way. But go by columns, see how it's going a different way. Okay, and the next thing we can choose is find all or find next. So let's press find all and see what happens. Okay, so it's going to give us a complete list of all of the examples that it's found of this word in text format, adapter. Now we can also choose whether we want to search within the workbook or within the sheet. The difference is if it's sheet, it's only going to look in this tab that you have open over here. But if you look in workbook, it's going to look in this tab, this tab, this tab, and all of the tabs you have open in your workbook. The last option you have is you can choose to search within formulas, within values, notes, or in comments. So if someone leaves a note or a comment on an Excel workbook, you can look specifically for that, for example, for a person's name or a comment like incorrect, etc., and find all of those. That's an alternative way of looking through that. Generally, we're going to look through these two options, formulas or values. By default, it's going to go to formulas. Since we're looking for text, it doesn't really matter whether we're looking in formulas or values, but it will become important later on. So back to the find all function. So every time I click on an instance in here, Excel is going to actually change the selection of the cell which it actually links to. So for example, if I choose this one down here, you'll see that Excel is now selecting B17, which is the cell reference over here, and also it tells you the name of the tab that we're currently in. So I change this to this, and then find all again. It'll tell you all the references. So we got some references in sheet 3, for example, and so forth. Okay, so the other cool thing we can do is if I just change this to sheet and find all again, I can select all of these, and Excel is going to select all of those over here as well. And it also means that anything that I do in Excel, whilst these are still selected, I can change the format of these and so forth. I've got a bunch of them selected. I can now change these and highlight them, or change the text code, and I can go out and delete out of it, and all of these will remain highlighted. So that leads us on to the secondary use of find and replace, is actually looking for a certain format or changing format in a different way. So let's say we've got our item name up the top. Let's put that in. And I want to change all instances of item name throughout the workbook. There's one over here as well. I want to change that to a yellow color. So what we can do is we can actually use the find, or we can use the replace function. So we want to find item name, so it's going to pull up all instances of this. We want to look in the workbook, and we want to replace this with the same text, but we want to change the format. Now I'm going to put in a fill of a slight yellow or a bright yellow like this, and I'm going to put a border of an outline like that. So I'm next going to go replace all, and hopefully that should replace that cell up the top and the other instance of item name with that formatting at the top. So let's have a look at sheet 3. So you can see item name is now showing up over there in the format that we requested as well. So we can also change an existing formatting. So let's say we don't want to search for any text at all. We just want to look for a set format. So hopefully I've got the same format configured correctly. So let's choose format from a cell. We can actually use this dipper, and it's an eyedrop tool actually, and select the cell that you want. It's going to pick up the format that's in that cell, so we don't actually accidentally get the wrong format and it's not going to find it. We know exactly what format's going to be in that cell. And the next thing we can do is, if I want to change everything to be the same format, we can go replace all in the entire workbook or the sheet. Let's do the sheet this time and go replace all. And now all of those rows with that formatted text will be changed to that as well. So why is this one a little bit different? It must be a slightly different format. Maybe they've changed the text size or the font, etc. So let's do the same process, and we're going to choose the format from a cell. This time we're going to choose that one, and we're going to replace all. Okay, so that didn't work this time. There must be something wrong with it. But let's override this and try again. It might be there because of the hashtag. So let's do a replace again. We're going to choose format from a cell. We're going to choose this one and replace. Okay, it's not finding it for some reason. But generally, this should work in all of your Excel workbooks. There must be something wrong with this cell. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk about, the find and replace to change cell references in formulas. So if you remember from the beginner's course, we talked about what are relative references and what are absolute references. So these are currently relative references. So D4, you'll notice that because there's no dollar sign in this formula, when I copy it across, the D4 will move across. Because I've moved it one to the right, the D4 reference will move one to the right. So this should now say E4. And if I move it down, instead of E4, it should say E5. There's no dollar sign in this formula. So if I quickly change this D4 to a dollar sign here and a dollar sign here, it's going to lock both the column and the row. Or I could just lock the column and not the row. So if I copy this across, it's now locked the column as is, so I can move it across to the right, it's not going to move. But because I haven't locked the row, if I move it down, it is going to move. See, it's moved down to D5 times 0.2. So let's just say in your workbook you want to replace, you've got a bunch of formulas which are not locked, as is the case, so they're all relative like this, and we want to change a large number of those formulas to be locked, i.e. to be absolute. Instead of going through and manually adjusting it or changing one and then dragging it down and then changing the next column and dragging it down, there's a much faster way we can do it using the find and replace function. So how we do it is we select the range you want to select, or if you want to change the entire workbook, don't select anything, and then press Control F. The next thing we want to do is we want to take the portion of the cell reference that we need to replace. So just be careful when you're doing this as well, is that you need to do it in a way that's not going to impact any other formula in your range or any other text value in your range. So in this case, I'm going to select the D, and I'm going to replace this with $D, $. Now what that's going to do is it's going to lock both the column and the row. I'm going to press replace all. Okay, it hasn't come up with any instances of that. So let's try that one more time. So let's find, it's because we've still got these formats over here. So let's clear those right now, clear that, and then try that again, replace all. Now it's made 23 replacements in this column, and as we select these formulas, you'll now see that instead of just D4, it's saying the whole reference is locked, and so forth. So we can then copy this across, and then D4 will be locked, and we can keep the same formula in place. So that's just a very quick way of doing that. And of course, we can do that within the sheet or the entire workbook, and so forth. We can also tell it to just look in formulas or values if we're just looking for a particular value, and so forth. Also use the find and replace function to change certain parts of a formula as well. So in this instance, we've got a random formula in here. It's just saying D4 divided by 0.2 minus 100. So let's say for all of these formulas which have the same structure, so it's divide by 0.2 minus 100, we want to actually change this to plus 100. So what we can do is select the range that we want to replace and do Control F, replace, and we'll put the minus symbol there, which is what we want to replace, and replace that with a plus symbol. Click replace all, and our formulas are going to be updated for all of these. We can do the same for the divider as well. And let's say we want to replace that with a multiply, replace all. Let's see what happens. Okay, perfect, it's replaced it. Now the only thing to be aware of is the limitation is we can't replace the multiplication sign. Now the reason is that Excel assigns this, when you're doing a search function, to being any value. It's basically like a mystery value. So if you're going to search that, yes, it's going to look for these, but if you try and replace it, let's put in a division symbol instead. Let's see what happens. Replace. It's going to replace the whole text string. Now the reason that works like that is because it's looking for any value, and it's saying, okay, the whole value is this. So unfortunately we can't do it that way. It's just it's an unfortunate workaround that we're going to have to do. There are other things we can do instead. For example, we can use the paste special function. So what we can do is, if we want to get this as a negative value, instead of doing replacing the multiplication with a times negative, what we could do is just copy and paste that, select the range, paste special, formula, and then we can do multiply or divide. So let's change it to, say, divide maybe, and then all of a sudden these have been converted by -1, or we can just change the first formula and do it that way as well. So there's a few different ways you can work around it. So just be conscious of that and how Excel works in that situation. Next thing we're going to discuss is the go-to special function, and also by extension these specific shortcuts to go-to formulas, notes, etc. So let's start off with these little shortcuts down here. If we press go to formulas on this workbook over here, what we can do is it'll take us straight to all the cells within the sheet that have formulas in them. So perhaps we want to highlight these as a green. This is a good way of reviewing a workbook. And then what we might do is go to constants, and we're going to hard-code, these are the hard-coded values, and we're going to change those to a blue color, like so. And then what we can do is we can highlight conditional formatting, so you can find those, and so forth. You can also go to data validation and notes as well. So data validation is things like a drop-down box and something that restricts what you can actually insert in a cell. And then we've got go to notes. So any cell with a note on it, you can just jump straight to that as well. So once we've got that, you can look for inconsistencies as well. So if you've got a formula or you've got values in here that are hard-coded when they should be formulas, you'll know straight away, and you can query with the person whose work paper it is why this isn't a formula or why this isn't linking to a source sheet at the end of the workbook. So those are some basic functions, and once we've got those selected, we could replace those with a different formula or a different value using the replace function. Now the next thing that I want to show you is the go to special, and this is a very powerful tool, the go to special. So it gives us a lot of different options in here. We can go to constants and formulas, which we talked about before, but also within formulas it gives us some different options. For example, we could go straight to formulas that have an error in it, and let's highlight those as red. Now once we've got those selected, we can figure out what's wrong with those and correct those straight away. We can either copy and paste a value over here. We can see that the value is because this is text, whereas these are numbers. Now what else can we do? We can go to formulas involving text and show those, so nothing's there. We can go to special blanks, so this is a powerful tool as well. Notice how I've got some cells in here which don't have anything in them at all. All this does is inserts selects those cells. So what we can do here is let's say we want to make sure that any blanks in formulas is equal to 0. We can select our range. We can go to special blanks. And then within these cells, we just type 0 and then press Control Enter, and all of those cells will now have a 0 in it. Alternatively, what we can do is we can make sure it equals the row above it, so we can just go equals that, just in one example, and then again press Control Enter, and the same formula will apply to all of those blanks, and it's going to fill those in. So I'll just put that as a different color, maybe an orange, so you can see that even the text is equaling the cell above where it's missing, and this value over here is equaling the formula from above. So what else have we got? We could go to the last cell, or to conditional format. So the last cell, if we press that, it's going to take us right to the bottom of the most active filled out cell. So it's not going to take us to the bottom of the work paper, just the last one that has a value in it. Of course, there's a keyboard shortcut for that instead if you prefer. So the two ones I want to show you is Control Home, which takes us to the very first cell up the top, which is A1, as long as it has a value in it, and then Control End will take us to the bottom last tab, which is the same thing. For example here, where we've got some data in here from an employee, what I want us to do is to select the array of data. So I'm going to go Control Shift right to the end, and then Shift down to select the rows I want. Next, I'm going to go Find Select, go to Special, and then I'm going to press blanks. Okay, and now it's going to select only the values that have nothing in them, and I'm going to press 0 and then Control Enter, and now all of these values have something in it. We could do the same thing for errors over here. So if we select our data range, and let's say we've got a bunch of errors over here, go to Special, then choose Formula Errors. It'll populate those two values there. What we can do is we can just get them to equal to 0, and then all of a sudden our whole workbook no longer has errors in it, and they'll be replaced by 0 values. So maybe a quicker way of doing the if error function. Okay, that's everything that I wanted to show you for refining and replacing data. So it's a lot more powerful than some other applications, including changing formatting, finding blanks, finding errors, or updating your formulas, including to put in the right absolute or reference or relative formula references in your workbook. So quite a powerful tool. I look forward to the next lesson with you, which is on importing and exporting data in Excel.